My guest today on Voices of the Valley, y'all know you've probably seen his face because he really is everywhere. That's what I say. You're always the man about town. Dr. Charles Lomax, President CEO of the Knoxville Area Urban League. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so a lot of folks know you from the Urban League, but I just kind of want to go back a little bit and talk about your time here in Knoxville. You're born and raised here in Knoxville?
I am.
Okay, so tell me, what part of town are you representing? Where did you go to school?
So I've lived a little everywhere in Knoxville, with the exception of South, but born in East Knoxville, started out at Green School before it was a magnet school, and then around second grade, my parents moved out west, and that put me at Cedar Bluff my third grade year, and then the lines ended up changing, and that shifted me to Carnes, and ended up being at Carnes from fourth grade all the way through high school.
Okay, yeah, a little bit of everywhere.
A little bit of everywhere. Lived in North for a while, and now I'm kind of in Northwest.
Okay, so let's talk about your life. Looking over your career, you have done a lot when it comes to community and community involvement. And I'm going to start that first with the church, because you're actually Reverend Dr. Charles Lomax. Let's talk a little bit about your calling to the ministry. When did that happen?
Oh, goodness. I actually started in ministry at 18 years of age at Tabernacle Baptist Church in East Knoxville. And so that was kind of my home family church. Grandmother, mother, dad, all attended. And my mom still attends that church as well. And started in ministry there. I was actually a freshman at UT when I was kind of going through that process. And I currently pastor St. John Baptist Church, which is in Alcoa, and I've been there for coming up on 12 years.
What's that like? Because you are a young man. I'm going to give you a young man because
you're
my age group. So you're a young man.
Thank you.
To pastor, to be a senior pastor at a church, to be given that opportunity, what has that been like for you? Or what's your philosophy in getting that done?
You know, it's been amazing. It's been an interesting journey. It was my first pastorate. I've been there, started at the age of 29 at that church. And it's just a wonderful, loving congregation that has embraced me and has also kind of allowed me the leeway to do some of the other things that I've been interested in just community-wise. And so, a lot of times churches and other jobs, get very possessive of you and don't really want you to, branch out or do anything. But they've been extremely supportive of me and in my journey and my career. And I couldn't ask for a better congregation.
Now, your mom didn't move over to your church in Alcoa?
I wouldn't let her. I wouldn't let her. So yeah, she's still at our home church, and my dad still attends as well, but he's actually on musical staff at another church.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your early career.
Okay.
When I say community involvement, where did you get your start?
So I got my start as far as community work, actually working at the Election Commission. I am what I would call kind of a two-time dropout from the University of Tennessee. And the first time I dropped out was actually after my first semester. I went, and I'm the poster child for what you're not supposed to do for when you go to college.
What'd you do?
So, well, after that first semester, I ended up going home on academic probation.
Okay.
And so I wanted to kind of take some time, reset, get everything together, and so went back to the university that following year. But at that point, I had, because of my poor academic performance, lost what few scholarships I had, and so ended up having to pay out of pocket my way through school. And I did that for a year, but just didn't have the resources, and so ended up dropping out again and started working some odds and ends. And so one of those odds and ends was doing a petition at the Election Commission, which was supposed to be a 2-week job.
Okay.
And while working there, just trying to get a few dollars in my pocket, ultimately that 2 weeks turned into 4 years. And so that was kind of a start for me of really getting involved in community work beyond the church and really seeing kind of a different side of engagement within the community.
I love this. I'm smiling because obviously it all worked out because you are a doctor, you went on to get degrees. But I think it's a wonderful lesson for young people to know you don't have to get it all right the first time on the first, just the first try.
Yeah. And, I can't take the credit. It was a village. It really was. And so I had people around me, including the then administrator of elections, Greg McKay, who really said, hey, let's make sure that you get your degree. And he kind of pushed me out of a space where I was getting comfortable. And, from there, went able to go back and still needed to work. And so worked around my schedule at UT. And ultimately, it's amazing actually to look at the first couple of years of my transcript versus the last 2 years of my transcript, where, I'm having to work and maintain a full-time job. And it's just a completely drastic difference as far as, the transformation in, okay, I'm paying for this and I'm putting into it. My grades are a lot better, like Dean's List. Okay.
I'm accountable now because it's my money.
Exactly. So that was kind of my journey there.
So what happened after that? So you've worked in several. One that really sticks out is the Director of Community Empowerment for the city of Knoxville.
So after finishing UT, I moved away for a few years and lived in Georgia. And ultimately, like you said, Director of Community Empowerment. And the interesting thing about that is that I had the privilege of following kind of in the footsteps of Avis Reed, who held that role prior to me, and Tank Strickland, who we just recently lost, who held that role for a number of years before her. The interesting thing about that is that Tank is actually the one that kind of connected me with the Election Commission. And so it ended up kind of being a full circle that, the person that kind of got me engaged and involved in that, some almost 20 years later, I'm in the role that he held for a number of years. And so that was kind of an accident that I ended up in that role. And I say that because I ran for office in 2019. And in my running for office, that kind of opened the door for me to occupy that space.
That's actually a pretty fascinating story too, just that run for city council, because you lost by less than 1%, was like 80 votes or so?
79,
70,
but who's counting? Who's counting?
I was rounding. 79 votes. What lesson did you learn from that? Because that's a tough pill to swallow when you're like, if 79 of y'all would have just gotten out and voted,
I did make a few phone calls, hey, did you vote on election day? Yeah. But no, it was a fascinating journey. And what led to that is for 7 years, I served on Planning Commission, Metropolitan Planning Commission, now Knoxville, Knox County Planning. And so upon my return to Knoxville, I got a phone call from then Mayor Rogero asking me if I would be willing to serve on Planning Commission. And, even on the phone, I kind of had this puzzled look on my face. And, ma'am, I don't know very much, if anything, about planning or zoning or land use. And she said, I'm aware, but, we have a lot of engineers, architects, designers, et cetera, on there. And I want the perspective of, the regular citizen. And so it was a bit of a learning curve, but being in that space and occupying that role and serving with just a number of tremendous people that I served with on Planning Commission kind of opened my eyes to, just things around our city and some inequities as well. And the Planning Commission, in many regards, is kind of a quasi-judicial body. And a lot of the decisions that are made are recommendations to either city council or county commission. And so at the point of, experiencing that and really seeing some of the things, I said, I'm always encouraging others to run for office. Why not, go ahead and put my money where my mouth is and run myself? And it was an interesting journey because we had a ragtag, scrappy kind of a grassroots campaign. And it was me and my then 20-year-old campaign manager, who was a junior at the University of Tennessee. And I had to share him, with his classes and with the debate team. But we had a game plan and we stuck to it. And at the end of the day, we fell short, but it was a tremendous experience. Met a now dear friend in Lynn Fugit, who I ended up running against at the time. And it was just an amazing journey.
What was it like getting that call from Indian Kincannon saying, you know what, like I saw what you did with your campaign. I think I want you to, serve in a different capacity?
Well, so I'm very naive about a lot of things. And at the point that the election was over, I'd always been told, if you run for office and you lose, you're going to hit this brick wall because you're used to campaigning and going and, doing this forum and this debate. And so it didn't happen the first day because we had to run around the city and collect all of our yard signs. It didn't happen the second day because we had to clear out our campaign headquarters. And then the third day is when it really kind of happened. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do now?
Right.
And so maybe a couple of days after that is when I ended up getting the phone call. And, she said, this is India Kincannon, mayor-elect. And, I kind of kept my eye on your race because we had ran in the same cycle. And I'm interested to know how you closed the gap, because in the primary, we lost by nearly 3,000 votes. And so between the primary and the general, we were able to stick to our game plan, bring that down to a deficit of 79. And she said, can we have a cup of coffee? And so ultimately that was an invitation to serve on her transition team to help get her ready to assume the role of mayor. And from that turned into the director of community relations, which ultimately became the director of community empowerment.
What did you learn about your time in the mayor's office? So just observing and seeing the city from a different perspective.
I learned the importance of hearing everyone's voice. And that's something that I picked up on the campaign trail, but just kind of being in that role where you're, so hands-on with community. And we had so many things that kind of fell under my department, including our Office of Neighborhoods, and really just kind of touching every area within our city, our Police Advisory Review Committee, and, those that have had interactions with law enforcement that, potentially didn't go as it should have. And working with our youth through some of that work, it's really just one of those things where you see the importance of hearing all the perspectives and really meeting people where they are and on that ground level.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little about the Urban League. So, I would say you had like a 3-year period where it was a lot of change, from the, running for office, not getting it, then working at the mayor's office. Then all of a sudden this opportunity opens up at the Urban League. Phyllis Nichols is retiring, who's been there forever, longtime staple of the Urban League. When you first heard about her retiring, were you like, oh wait, maybe I would like this? Or did somebody get in your ear and say, have you thought about this? How did that, I would love to know, how did that work? How does one say, I think I'm ready to take on the Urban League?
Well, I don't know if that was the mentality of it. Very much, at the point of hearing that she's retiring, it's like, oh my goodness, this is, a staple, like you said, and Phyllis Nichols is a force of nature if you've never had the opportunity to meet her. And so I was very reluctant, actually, to really put my name in the hat because I was in a role that I absolutely loved and the work that I was doing and felt very comfortable and confident in that. Had been able to build a great team around me within our community empowerment department. And so I forget what the last day to apply was, but that was the day I applied. Wow. And I remember it was due at 5 p.m. I hit submit at 4:47. And because
that's a little close. It's a little close the way technology works.
I was in a good position and felt like we were making a difference within that space. And so it was one of the things where I was very upfront and shared with the mayor that this was something that I had done, not because I didn't love what I was doing or working at the city, but it was one of those things where if I didn't, I always would have wondered what if, and would have had that regret of kicking myself by not simply trying.
So you get the call, hey Charles, you got the job. What goes through your head?
Well, first of all, it was a long, intense process. Let me say that.
Okay.
It probably the most intense process for any endeavor that I've gone through, really? but rightfully so, because just locally, nationally, and just going through that process. But I get the call, and it was all just kind of come at you at once. And so I received the call in October of last year, the week of the annual Urban League Gala. And so the gala was that Thursday, and that's when they wanted to kind of roll it out and announce it. And I found out that Monday. And so it was just a whirlwind, but just looking back on it, such a wonderful experience it really was. And so I wouldn't change any of it.
So what's your game plan for the Urban League? I think anytime you change the guard, obviously it's to make things, prosper, and you want to go upward.
Absolutely.
That's without a doubt. But how did you think about this in terms of getting out from under Phyllis's umbrella? Because you got to now make your own legacy at the Urban League.
So she has laid a tremendous foundation for the Urban League. I am so glad to say that I inherited a great situation with our organization. And sometimes with transition, especially, of a long-standing leader, that's not always the case. Right. And so, but she left us in great position. We have a great team and staff at the Urban League, many of whom have been there for a long time. Our longest-standing employee has been there for 19 years. And so,
is that Clarence? Clarence Carter?
It is not. So
I thought he would be the longest one. Okay.
Yeah, he's only been there for 10 years. And I say only, but he's been there for 10 years.
Okay.
But yeah, we have a great team and a great staff. But like you said, we always want to be able to take it to the next level. And so, we're working at maintaining what has been and leaving that legacy in place while also building upon that for the next generation and for those that may not be familiar with the work of the Urban League or how we came about or what our purpose is.
That's my next question. I try not to assume that everybody knows about these organizations just because they're on the news a lot, right, or in the paper a lot. What is the Urban League?
So the Knoxville Area Urban League is an affiliate of the National Urban League. National Urban League came about in 1910. And in 1910, as you had individuals who were leaving the southern part of the country, heading north, looking for a better existence way of life, the Urban League came about to essentially help those individuals to find somewhere to work and somewhere to live. Because if you're picking up your life and relocating across country, you're going to need somewhere to lay your head. You're going to need somewhere to earn some money. That's right. And so ultimately it was about workforce development and housing. And to this day, those are still two major tenets of the Urban League: workforce development and housing. And so the Knoxville Area Urban League came about in 1968. And we are one of 4 urban leagues across the state in our 4 major cities. Mm-hmm. And 3 of us were actually founded in 68, including Chattanooga and Nashville. And Memphis came along a little earlier in the 1940s. But the Knoxville Area Urban League is operational in a few different areas: education, entrepreneurship, health, housing, jobs, and justice. And so those are the pieces that we touch, and really trying to make an impact and help people to excel upwardly so that they can achieve their highest potential and have the desires that they want. And beyond those components, we also have a young professionals organization for individuals 21 to 40. And I've aged out as well. I know.
So close.
So close, but yet so far away. So 21 to 40, and then we also have a component of really just working with our youth, and that's something that I'm really passionate about, and really building that up and helping them to excel as well. You
all just took some of your youth to Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington for the anniversary.
We did.
What was that all about? I mean, their faces on social media, it was absolutely wonderful to see.
Oh my goodness, it was tremendous. We actually just had our national conference in Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. And while we were in Houston, Texas, they were talking about the 60th commemoration of the March on Washington and Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Mm-hmm. And, they said that we hope that you will join us there. And in my mind right then, I said, you know what? I want to take some of our kids and some of our scholars to Washington to experience this, because it's such a historic moment. Right. And I, wasn't around during the first one. And I said to myself, this is something that I want to experience as well. And so as soon as I got back, I got with my team and I said, listen, what is it going to take for us to be able to, get a bus and to get some students on this bus so that they can experience this? And I had to get up there a little earlier just for some meetings and some other things. But these students, they were such troopers, because they got on a bus at 1:30 a.m. Saturday morning.
Oh, wow.
Rode the bus all the way to D.C. with a couple of stops along the way. Got there, stood out in the heat for about 4 or 5 hours, only to load the bus and to ride right back.
Oh my goodness.
And they were absolutely, just tremendous. They had a great time, and I hope that in the process that they gained a little appreciation for some of the history as well. And they were able to hear some of the great speakers that were there, including Martin Luther King the third, and his daughter as well. And it was just tremendous.
That'll be like a core memory, when years from now, when they look back on their childhood and they reflect on their high school years, that'll be something they'll talk about. Like, remember that time we went to Washington with the Urban League?
That's my hope. That is my hope.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we are exposing anyone and everyone that comes through the doors of our building to new opportunities and new insights that potentially they just weren't aware of or hadn't paid attention to before.
What are some of the encounters that you've had at the Urban League that have made you go, okay, this was a good idea? Like this was a good move.
So we've always been kind of, operational in the education space. But since I've been there, one of the things that we've done, we've opened our doors to be a site for adult education. And for those that, for whatever opportunity, did not have the privilege or the opportunity to finish their high school, degrees or their diploma. And so being able to open our door to that and people coming in and getting their GED or their high set, and seeing them and their excitement of being able to go out, get a job that is paying them a little bit more money and helping them, like that tugs at my heart. We've now kind of entered into this space of health. And in that space, honestly, with the pandemic, we were one of 6 affiliates across the country to receive funding to help underserved communities to get vaccinated. And it kind of went from that to flu vaccinations as well, because we got to that stage where we were dealing with not just the pandemic, but also the flu and RSV, and it was kind of that triple threat going on. But in the process of that, just realizing and recognizing that our community in which our building is situated is a food and pharmacy desert, and that those within our demographic that we typically serve have a higher, opportunity of various diseases. And so
hypertension, blood pressure, all
of that. And so we started doing all of that when we were opening our doors and partnering with so many of our healthcare providers throughout the community to do just that, blood pressure screenings, carotid arteries, eye examinations, and beyond that, recognizing that minorities are at a higher risk for cancer and for Alzheimer's. And, these are the things that we're now focused on and trying to be that conduit that pushes information into our community. And then one of the other things that I'm really, really excited about is a collaboration that we have with the University of Tennessee School of Law, Knox County, and the clerk's office, working on our expungement clinics. And so helping those that have been justice involved, that have paid that debt to society, and are able to have certain things expunged from their records, helping them to cross over, those barriers and those obstacles. So at the end of the day, that they can, again, go out, get a job, and be a contributing member that's able to provide for their family and their loved ones. And it's just a tremendous, thing that really tugs at your heart. We had one young lady to come through our building, student at Pellissippi, and she was in their nursing department, and tremendous grades, but had a thing on her record from 15 years ago. And that thing on her record, despite her grades, was hindering her from being able to get a job, and was able to witness a judge sitting in our building that was able to expunge her record. And she just busted out into tears because she had been trying to get a job, but this one thing from, again, 15 years ago was holding her back. And so this single mother is now able to go out there and to get the job that she's worked so hard to get. And it's making a difference in her life and in the life of her children. And so those are the things that really make me happy at the end of the day.
And it breaks a cycle for a lot of folks. If you're trying to kind of put that part of your life behind you, how can you if you can't make some money and move forward?
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. I love that part. What other? We have to talk about Shoes for Schools. That's one of the biggest events, probably one of the most recognizable events that you all do in the community, and it has grown. It's huge.
It is huge. This year was our 21st year of Shoes for School. And, as I said, one of the things that we want to do is build upon what has already been. And so we had our membership luncheon back in February of this year. It was the largest of that event that we've had. Shoes for School was also the largest that we've had this year. We were in Caswell Park. We had approximately 6,000 people that came through Caswell Park to get shoes and school supplies, and just so many community partners and agencies that were there along with us that pour into our community. And it really is an amazing thing to see, and you see how Knoxville and just the metro Knoxville area come together in those times, and really contribute to helping one another. And I don't even have the words to describe how awesome it is just to see how all of that comes together. And, in addition to the shoes and the school supplies, we're giving out haircuts, and,
I saw last time.
we're just having a huge party of it, and handing out food. And it's amazing to see. It really is.
What's the hardest part of your job that you've noticed so far after these, 6, 7, 8 months?
The hardest part has really just been kind of getting acclimated and, learning both the local organization as well as the national organization. Being surrounded by a great team, again, makes that transition a little easier, but really just coming in and kind of hitting the ground running. And luckily, like I said, being surrounded by such great people makes it a little easier. But really just getting my mind wrapped around kind of where we are versus where we want to be 5, 10 years down the road.
Do you have any mentors?
Oh, I have a ton of mentors. I couldn't do what I do without mentors. And so grateful that I still have Phyllis Nichols, who's on speed dial. And so sometimes I just have to call her up and I'm like, hey, let's talk, have a conversation with me. And she is one that, regardless of where she is or what time it is, she will pick up the phone. I called her one time and she said, hey, I'm about to board a plane in Greece. Can I call you back?
Okay, so I keep up with her, and she is living her best life. She's living her best life right now in retirement. She has been all over the world.
She is.
So, yeah.
She is. But yeah, she's been tremendous. I still keep in touch with Avis Reed, up until his passing, Tank Strickland, Dr. Harold Middlebrook.
That was a tough one for a lot of folks.
That was a tough one. It really was.
Yeah.
Dr. Harold Middlebrook, Greg McKay, who has been a longtime mentor. And of course, I still lean and depend on mom and dad as well. And so they give me advice.
Are your parents proud of you?
I hope so. I hope so. Everything that I do, I've always wanted to make them proud. And, I'm an only child as well. And so being kind of that only child, a lot of pressure. And so want to make sure that I don't embarrass my parents. And so, all of that comes back on me. And so I just want to make sure that, I've continued to make them proud. But, just beyond them, the community as a whole. I'm accountable to the community. And I want to make sure that they're pleased as well.
You've had some time in Atlanta. You said you went to Morehouse, Atlanta. So you've had a taste of big city life. Atlanta's huge. Why come back to Knoxville? Why continue to pour into Knoxville?
If I'm completely honest,
I
didn't want to come back. If I'm completely honest, I did not want to come back. At the point that I moved to Atlanta,
okay.
I had this mentality, I've spread my wings, I am gone. And so went to Morehouse School of Religion to work on my master's. And while I was down there, I moved in 2007. And so while I was down there, we kind of had this whole economic downturn, and the market at that point in Atlanta was oversaturated, and I couldn't find a job. And I'm looking, and I'm getting closer and closer to graduation, and wasn't pastoring at a church at the time, and couldn't find a job. And one of the best, I'll never forget this, one of the best interviews that I ever had was actually at Foot Locker. And I crushed that interview. And even the guy told me, he said, you crushed this interview. He said, but I can't hire you. And I was like, why not? He said, because you're overqualified. And at the point that I hire you, you're going to find something better, and I'm going to be back in the same position that I'm in. And I shared with him, I said, I completely understand that, but I need to pay my bills.
Right.
And so I didn't get the job. I didn't get the job. And, you know, my time in Atlanta was interesting. It really helped to shape me into the person that I am. And it was a struggle financially. And I'll never forget the point that I graduated. My parents came down and they were excited. And I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment. And so I took the futon that I had in my living room. And as I'm getting ready for graduation, my mom, you know, is there, and I'm getting my clothes out and picking out my tie and laying my gown out. And my mom sees my shoes and she says, "Come on, we're going to the store right now." And I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "We're not going to the store." I said, "I'm going to walk across the stage in these shoes." And the reason being, I'm sorry, I'm starting to get a little emotional, but the reason being, my shoes had holes in the bottom of them. And I graduated with my master's walking across the stage with shoes that had holes in them. And I told her, I said, "We can get a pair of shoes, but I'm walking across the stage in these because these were the shoes that got me through while I was down here." And to this day, I still have those shoes. I don't wear them, but I still have them because they're a reminder of just where I've come from and, you know, what I've been through. And a lot of people don't know that side of my story. And at the point that I came back to Knoxville, it was Greg McKay that ultimately kind of brought me back because he said that, "I know this isn't exactly what you want, but your old job is here for you if you need it." And so I came back and started working for the Election Commission again during that time. And he said, "You can be here as long as you need to be until you find what you're looking for." And ended up getting a job just a couple of months later working for the Knoxville Leadership Foundation. And so that was kind of my first entrance into the nonprofit world, working for KLF. And I was with their Amachi program, which is their mentoring program for children who have at least one parent incarcerated in state or federal prison. And so working there is kind of what kind of got me involved in that nonprofit space. And while working there is when I got called to my church in Alcoa.
You ever look back on your life, like when you tell that story and you think about the struggle of completing your degree, financial troubles, and then to look at yourself today, you know, what message does that send for people who sometimes may feel like they got to give up because things are just not working out in the moment?
Yeah. For me, that message is don't lose your faith. Trust the process and surround yourself with people that pour into you. And again, I'm a product of my community and a product of my village. And be it through mentors or just close personal friends, I've always kind of had that support system that's been there. And my life, in my opinion, has kind of been just that example of a door closing, but a better one opening. And so, you know, a lot of people lose an election and see that as a great defeat. But for me, it was a catapult to something greater. Ultimately with the city of Knoxville and now with the Urban League. And honestly, that's just been the case with just about everything in my life where, you know, I've encountered some obstacles along the way or hardship, but that opened the door for something else and really just, you know, trusting the process and not losing your faith along the way.
With the Amachi program, how tough was that to work with children who are going through really unbearable circumstances? I think a lot of folks can't relate to having a parent who is incarcerated. That's just a whole different kind of life struggle.
It is. And, you know, part of my job and role there was working with the mentors to help to train them, to work with those families and with the kids, and to kind of do the ongoing training as well and match support. And, you know, really having someone there in your life, not necessarily to tell you which direction to go, but to be there alongside you, to walk with you, to hold your hand in that process makes all the difference. Mentoring is one of those things that, you know, people don't really appreciate and understand how much of a difference it can make in your life. And if you have a parent incarcerated, you're more likely yourself to kind of end up in that cycle. And so the whole idea of that program is about breaking the cycle and helping those young people to see different alternatives and different possibilities for what life can look like and how it can turn out. And, I hope that my time in that role was fruitful and impactful in that part. But, all of these years later, I still have people come up to me who were mentors and say, hey, I remember you when you worked for Machi. You helped me with my match. And, my mentee is now graduated from college or, has done this.
Wow.
And, hearing those stories and how those young people have really just, excelled and done tremendous things is awesome to hear.
Do you think everything that every chapter in your career has brought you to this point with the Urban League, like ready to take on this job?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I, through my work, through the church and in the faith community, the nonprofit, the government aspects of it, I think that it's kind of really built all to this culmination of me taking on this role. Not that, I was fully equipped or prepared or ready, because, even after you get in something, you're like, wow, there was more to this than I really thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every job.
But I do feel that, every step kind of led me to this point, at least to the extent that I said, I want to try this and I want to see how I can help to shape this and take it to the next level.
Charles Lomax, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. I learned a lot about you that I didn't know, so thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you.